What's up, everybody? Lou from Hypocritic here, back on the show floor at PAX East 2023. We are here this time with Billy from Shared Memory to talk about his game, Animal Well.
Hello.
Thanks so much for taking some time this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So for those who don't know, please tell us about Animal Well.
Yeah, so Animal Well is a game that I've been working on by myself for about 5.5 years now. In the game, you play as this kind of nameless, amorphous blob circle character. You start the game, you hatch from a flower, and the game doesn't give you any explanation about where to go, and you find yourself in this kind of underground, surreal subterranean environment, and you just kind of explore, and as you go you find different creatures that some of them are friendly, some of them might try to attack you. There's a lot of puzzles to solve, and a lot of different directions you can go in, and the world's just filled with secrets, so you just kind of poke around and see what you can find, and you kind of figure things out as you go.
Awesome. Very kind of exploratory and discovery based in nature, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
How did you initially come up with the idea for those core mechanics in the gameplay? Was it something that sort of ebbed and flowed over time? Did you have that vision right away and just carry it out for a few years? How did that come about?
I think it kind of came together somewhat organically. I knew I wanted to make a game that was very sort of terse in its use of words and dialogue, and was very much very light on tutorial. So I found it fun to figure out how to design things in a way that the player is sort of guided into learning how things work organically, and constructing situations where that they're kind of forced to learn a mechanic, and then managing all the different ideas in the game and sort of keeping inventory of I know what a player understands at various points, and then always being sure to only introduce one more new thing at a time, and then building that out, but also then having all those ideas sort of represented in this contiguous world where they can still have a lot of options to explore in different directions, and giving them the maximum amount of freedom while also keeping that experience still tight and guided. It's been a fun design problem.
And it sounds like kind of a challenging mark to hit at the same time, especially because, as you mentioned, it's a one-person team of
Mm-hmm.
just you. What was the experience like trying to flesh those mechanics out and figure out how to strike the right balance between having that more discoverability aspect of the game without leaving players too confused or frustrated with what to do next? Tell me about that process a little bit.
Yeah, it's very iterative and organic. Usually I'll just design a new mechanic, and honestly I have to kind of go back and take a look at everything I've done before and see where does this fit in, how does this affect sort of everything I have in place, and it's a lot of just moving things around, and a lot of times I'll just take notes of all right, I don't know, first there's buttons, I need to teach them that they can press buttons, then I need to teach them that they can use this particular item, and then there's certain mechanics that combine in an interesting way, and then I have to make sure that they don't get to a place where they find too many new things, because then that's it can be overwhelming or frustrating. They just have no idea what to do.
Right.
And then also there's a matter of I don't want to give players too many paths to take at a time, but there's a balance to strike. So if you come into a room and you see even locked gates, there's 3 locked gates, that I feel that can be a little much, where you're all right, I can't go here, I can't go here, I can't go here, where can I go? So there's things instead of putting a locked gate, I'll have a wall that gets blown up instead, so you don't even know there's a passage there until you come back through it the other direction, so
okay. You're
not even thinking about it. So it's kind of managing how many things they're even thinking about at a time, and
right.
Trying to still keep things interesting, but also focused at the same time.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrangle, I'm sure. Now, let's touch on the art style here for a second.
Sure, yeah.
Very evocative in terms of the color choices that are used, the pixel aesthetic where everything's sort of very minimalistic in that way.
Thank you.
What inspired that art style specifically? Is it kind of a practicality thing? Did you draw inspiration from anywhere in particular? Where'd that come from?
I think I've always had a soft spot for pixel art, and I just find myself being drawn to it. As terms of like specifically how I do it, I think I made a conscious decision early on to not really focus on going for the like really sort of purist, nostalgic, like retro feel, and I wanted to see what opportunities there were for incorporating more like modern rendering techniques into pixel art and still like trying to make it look cohesive. So I didn't want to do like what like Shovel Knight, for example, did, where they like struck to the NES's like hardware limitations and made something that really looks like it could have come from that era. I was like kind of going in the other direction of seeing like, okay, well, we have these like powerful computers and consoles, and like what can pixel art look like while still like taking advantage of all that?
Right.
Because I think it's almost like an art style that's kind of native to video games. Like we're showing things on screens that have hard edges, and instead of trying to hide that and make everything smooth with like anti-aliasing, all these other ways to cover that up, just like let that be the art style and see where we can go with that.
Yeah, and I even see some of the things that you're mentioning there with some more advanced like kind of lighting techniques around the character, some of the ways it interacts with things like vines and things that are in the environment, not necessarily possible on if you stick to those limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. One-person development team, as we mentioned a couple times now, a unique approach, even amongst I think the indie community in a lot of ways, where you'll have multiple people, where one person's an artist, one person's the designer, whatever. In terms of tackling it all yourself, what are maybe some of the challenges or interesting hurdles you had to kind of overcome? Maybe some that you didn't know you'd have to overcome, maybe some you did. What were some of the challenges of that entirely DIY approach that you found along the way?
I think overall just maintaining motivation over such a long development cycle has been like, that's what's prevented other projects, from getting done in the past. So I think my strategy has been to do things not necessarily the most efficient way, but the way that I like find the most enjoyable. So I think that's part of why I built the game's engine, for example. Not so much like I'm so picky about how it works, that there's some amount of that, but really that's like the funner way to do it for me. And over the course of many years, like I just have to like do things in the way that I find enjoyable so I don't get burnt out. And if I could like just like get in a state where the game is fun to work on regardless of whether it's close to being done or not, I can like keep doing that over and over again.
Makes sense. It is a long time for sure. Touching on the publication element maybe briefly,
sure.
Bigmode is going to be the publisher behind it. With such a long development history behind it, and I imagine they came on board fairly recently.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how either you found them or they found you, and how that kind of structure fell into place?
Yeah, it was pretty organic. I think I started working with my business partner, Dan Edelman, who had worked at Nintendo for a long time and works on other indie games like Axiom Verge. I started working with him like almost 2 years ago, and the plan was like, I just want to focus on the game and he can handle like all the biz dev and marketing stuff. And that was working out very well. And we got, some publicity from PlayStation. The game got featured in the Summer Games Fest Day of the Dev Showcase, and a few other things. But it was during Day of the Devs that Donkey did a video like kind of covering the show, and he gave Animal Well like a little 5-second shout out. And at the time I was like, oh, that's cool, and we got like a little wish list bump just from like that brief little shout out from him. So we knew he was a fan of the game. And then it was during Tokyo Game Show, me and Dan got to take a picture with Shuhei Yoshida, and he posted on Twitter like he does. And Leah, Donkey's wife, mentioned or like liked it and then followed Dan. And then they ended up having a little interaction and said like, thanks for, being fans of the game, and the little like shout out you guys gave Animal earlier this year. And at that point they let us know that they were planning on starting a publisher, and we kind of started conversations with them, and they let us know we were planning on self-publishing, but it just felt like too good of an opportunity to pass up, being like Bigmode's first game, and I knew there was going to be just like a ton of hype around it, and they have like very similar philosophies for like what a game could be, and there was like no tension at all between where they wanted to take the game and where the direction it was already going, and so it was like a perfect fit.
That's got to be nice. Last question then, is there a release date or window for Animal Well yet, and what platforms will it be released on?
No release date yet. It's just been, the main focus is making the game live up to the potential that we all have in mind for it. But I'm targeting maybe around the end of the year, and so far it's coming out on PlayStation 5 and Steam.
Awesome. Billy from Shared Memory, thank you so much, and keep it tuned here to Hypocritic for more from PAX East all weekend long.
No, thank you.